So, just to kind of give you a bit of background about what we're going to look at. My presentation, I'm going to skip through quite a lot. There's some detail you can read later when you get the slides, etc. But we're going to look at a bit of history of blockchain. Incidentally, who hasn't heard of blockchain in here? So almost one or two, just one or two. Okay, good. So of the rest of you, who can tell me how it works? So one of the points is you don't really need to know how it works to benefit from it, but what I can tell you is that blockchain is going to completely transform all of our lives from a data security point of view and what we can do with this information. So I'm going to work through some of these things. I'm not going to labour this too much. I've been involved in food technology for, I think it's 28 years now actually, losing count, and I've been involved in software technology for over 20 years. Mainly in the food safety area, around developing food safety management systems for industry. So, looking at the history of blockchain, just to give you a little bit of a background of where it's come from. These words are quite small on here, but blockchain's been around, or the technology, as it were, has been around for a long, long time, since the 1990s, in fact. And it was originally developed as a way of controlling the document or verifying the version of a document, so really a document control technology. The principle is very simple. You take the content of the document, you encrypt it with an encryption key, and that encryption key then is unique to that document. Change any content of the document, the encryption key also changes. Okay? So this principle can be applied to almost anything. Take a picture of any one of you, lovely human beings in this room. We can encrypt that and get a key that is only you, right? So in this respect, it's very, very similar to genetic technology we've been looking at here, which is also a form of encryption. So it's since evolved into Bitcoin. You've all heard of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin and blockchain are not the same thing. Blockchain is the technology which Bitcoin runs upon, and it happens to have various aspects to that, which we won't go into today, but there's usually a lot of confusion that they're the same thing. So 2008, the financial crash comes along, and Satoshi Nakamoto publishes his paper on Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden it's out there. And the first thing that was actually purchased with Bitcoin was pizza, so the food connection is very close there. So fast forward to 2011, 2012, 2013, and we start to see the Hyperledger project, which is a consortium with IBM and various big food companies. I'll speak more about that later on. And then they're starting to apply this to the supply chain. But it's a different kind of blockchain. It doesn't require these big servers to do very complex mathematical computations in order to have what they call proof of work. Okay, this new type of blockchain, or this type of blockchain for food supply chains, is much more about permissions. Who can see what? You know, because the food industry doesn't typically like to share a lot of information because they don't know who's going to do whatever with that information. So, especially with food safety, it can be quite a hot topic. So we then start to see Walmart and IBM in particular in the last couple of years running trials tracing mangoes and tracing pork in China. And what we're now seeing is the guy who was behind that project went to work as the Deputy Commissioner for the FDA, and so you can guess what's coming next. So the USA is really actually driving quite a lot of food safety legislation approaches at the moment, where Europe was before, and now they're kind of jumping ahead, and we're going to get dragged along. There's no question about all of this. So that's the history, but the main point is that we are now out of the theoretical. We're very much into the practicalities and so on. So I mentioned a couple of the myths earlier on there. You know, Bitcoin is not blockchain. Also, blockchain technology, people say it's not hackable. and this kind of thing. At the moment, standard blockchain technology is not hackable. However, quantum computing is on the horizon in the next 5, 10, 15 years, who knows how long. That can hack blockchains, just because the computing power with quantum computing is 17 billion times more powerful than what we have in our standard computing today. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about that kind of thing a bit later. But why is blockchain important? It's important because all of the systems that we operate in the food industry today are silos. If they're data silos at all, quite often they're just document silos. Food industry really largely operates on documents and spreadsheets, which is changing, and blockchain and digital ledgers are helping that change by driving this digitization of the supply chain. But having a digital supply chain is no use unless your internal systems are also digitized, because you need two systems to communicate. So this was like the 1980s, I would call, systems approach from a data perspective. So what is it, and what's so special about it? Really, it's just another type of database, blockchain. And this is the way that we really need to think about it. But the first point is that it's a distributed database. So no one person has overall control of that database. And that was Satoshi Nakamoto's big thing. He didn't want the banks to be in control of money. And in this case, with blockchain for the food supply chain, the idea is that no one organization is in control of all the data. And that then gives us a common way to share information that is easy then to break down the silos. So it's really a communication protocol in much the same way that TCP/IP led to the establishment of the World Wide Web as a protocol. So blockchain is a similar type of technology from that point of view. But how does it work? So along the supply chain, we've got farm traceability records, logistic traceability, and traceability is the big thing that people are looking at the moment. But I'm going to give you some ideas about a new way of doing things. So we record a product movement. Normally that would be recorded in a database, but we're going to record it on our blockchain. And then we record another movement from, say, the transport company that's moving the food. Well, this is where the cryptography now comes in. So in very, very simple terms, very straightforward terms, each record is cryptographically linked to the next record, sequentially, from block 1 to block 2 to block 3 to block 4. And if you change the contents, just like I said earlier on, if you change the contents of any of these blocks, it will invalidate the whole chain. So that's why they say that blockchains are immutable. So if you change something, you can detect the change immediately. And that's what makes them so interesting. Because when it comes to money, you want to have a ledger to be able to prove the way, who's been paid what and what money's in one person's account. And when it comes to traceability, you want to have a way of tracking where the product was at a given point in time, and so on and so forth. So immutability is very important for that. But there are some challenges, and those challenges revolve around things like speed. Blockchains are actually very slow. It can take you 10 to 15 minutes to get a Bitcoin transaction actually verified, which is no good if you're standing at the takeout waiting to give the guy your card and it's taking 15 minutes to, oh, well, you're approved. We can already do that much faster and much more efficiently today. Also, scalability. If you think about the ability to track everything that's going on in the food supply chain, that is a lot of data, and blockchains are just not up to that at the moment. So most of the existing applications tend to be very single, you could say siloed applications right now, and that's really the danger. And adoption is increasing as we proceed. But these are the kind of big things that blockchain helps with. Eliminating the middleman, kind of costs, etc., the brokers in the middle, consensus-based truth, having rules around things that everyone agrees, and so on and so forth. So, looking at some of these things. So, a couple of other points about a technology you might not have heard of. Who's heard of tangles? No one, I guess. Or DAGs, directed acyclic graphs. He said, I told you you didn't know how to, you need to know how this stuff works. But blockchains really are the very early versions of this technology. and they're linear in nature, whereas tangles are hierarchical. And that gives us actually a much better data model to map the food industry with. So my prediction is that tangles are going to be the Netflix equivalent of what blockchain is now, the Betamax. So looking at some of the kind of problems that need to be solved in the food industry, it's a many-to-many information sharing problem. So if something's introduced in the farm and then it spreads throughout the whole supply chain out through to the manufacturers, tier 1 suppliers and then the retailers, of course you can trace it back, but because each of these processors is different, the farmers are different and so on, the origin of an incident spreading out across the supply chain can be very significant. So with blockchain, you have distributed databases and everyone interfaces into these distributed databases. But each one of these databases is an exact copy of the others, and there are consensus rules that are built into that. So why is that important in food? For all of these reasons: traceability, monitoring supply chain risk, accountability, and also product recalls. So looking at how that fits in the longer term. So right now, the main sort of point that the consumer has with food, whether it's safety or allergens, is really what it tells them on the product label. So, now ladies, you don't need to put your hand up. How many people here are over 50? Okay, right. So when you get over 50, you get a thing called optical myopia. It's not optical myopia at all, it's presbyopia, right? Where you need to wear glasses. Now, I don't know if you've looked at any of these things recently, but the text on these is absolutely tiny, so the older you get, the harder it is to read them. So I'm going to be scanning that in a moment. But the problem is that consumers' only real engagement with food products in terms of allergens and what's in the product is the label. And quite often the writing on these things is absolutely tiny and very hard to read. And the label may be inaccurate. So in these days of smartphones and so on, it stands to reason that having something like an app that's hooked up to blockchain might help with some of that. So we developed a little proof of concept, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. But it's not just about the allergens, it's about all the other things. So there are 14 allergens on the list from an EU perspective, but there's a whole load of other ingredients which are in foods which cause problems, some of them severe anaphylactic problems, like strawberries, for example. So we also need to know what else is in those products. I'm going to skip this slide. You can read that one at your leisure later. And this is just by way of some of the companies that are involved in blockchain and food. Again, you can read that one later. And some examples of the existing early players in blockchain technology. So the one that I'm going to be showing you today is based on IOTA, which is a tangle, a DAG, I mentioned earlier. And we wanted to do some proof of concept work on that. But what's really happening in blockchain is people are focusing in on vertical markets. So RIPE.io are very much agriculture. Ambrosis are very much about IoT and sensors within food manufacturing and so on. So the future really with digital ledgers is really all about connecting our smartphones and our houses and homes actually with the food we're consuming. So for example, you'll be able to drive home from work and speak to your phone and find out what's in your smart fridge, because your smart fridge will know what's in there. If there's a food recall, your smart fridge will be able to tell you, you need to take this back to the retailer, and so on. These things are all things that are going to be happening with the Internet of Things, blockchain, and and smart labeling on food going forward. So these are just a list of some of the possible applications around there, and nearly all of these are being done by someone at the moment in terms of piloting the use of blockchain technology. So I want to focus in finally on the allergen side of things. So from a food safety systems point of view, we're taking a much higher level view than you guys are. So we're looking at the practical end of what does that mean for labeling, what does that mean for the consumer, what are the risks involved in that, how can we control those risks within a food manufacturing and distribution environment. And these are just some of the kind of things that go wrong. What you'll notice is that quite a lot of them are about information and information transfer. Right, you know, so the testing goes on, etc. as well. And what I'd like to show you here is the proof of concept that we've done, which is all about how the digital ledger technology Tango is being used in this scenario. So typically in a food situation, food companies are relying on their suppliers to provide them with raw material specifications. And those raw material specifications or material are gathered via what we call MAQs, which is a material assessment questionnaire. It gets sent out to the supplier then completes this information about what allergens they're handling on site, if they're handling those allergens on the same production line, if the allergens contained in the product, etc. So all of that information is then transferred back, reviewed and verified, and then that becomes the approved raw material specification for the material that goes into the finished product. The food industry then takes that information and then builds that up into the label and everything else that ends up going printed on the product. So what we do then is we then want to publish that data onto the Tango, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So I've got two bars here, and of course, being a live demonstration, this is always where it goes wrong. Okay, but I can see that we're connected. Okay, press the right buttons, and we should get my phone coming up on the screen. And this is I don't know if you've heard about the controversy for Huawei. This is a Huawei phone, so I'm spying on all of you right now. Okay, let's tap this. There we go. So, I've got a little, you'll see on here, there's a little allergen app here. And here we go, AllerSafe, we called it, as a little test thing. So the first thing is, and the reason this was inspired was there was a young girl who died after getting on a plane from London to Paris. I don't know if anyone heard about that one. She bought a sandwich which didn't label sesame on the label, and this is really the problem. The real problem is information, and that's going through here. So we're just going to select continue, and then we're just going to enter in, let's just go for nuts. So there's a list of the EU allergens here in this case. I'm just going to go save and continue. I should get the option to scan the product. Okay, so here we go. So we just put that in front of the camera, pick that out, and then it's going to tell us the name of the product, what allergens are in that particular product, and of course it's free from these ones, and we could include additional product information in that as well. So that information, that is probably your first live blockchain demonstration that you've seen. But it didn't look any different, did it? It's a mobile phone, we pressed a button, we scanned something, and it all happened. Because all that tech stuff just kind of goes on in the background. So there we go, I'm glad that went without a hitch. Okay, so just to finish off what just happened there. So how did it work? So our 3i Verified Food Safety software took all that information, rolled that up into an allergen table and published it onto the Tango, and then our application on our phone, our smart app, then scanned that and was able to retrieve that information. Now, why would you do this in a blockchain? So the point about the blockchain is that everyone along the supply chain can share their allergen information that's in their ingredients, and that information can automatically be rolled up into the product, which the consumer can then get the information from very, very easily at the end of that. So the big benefit is that there's one common protocol, if you like, for sharing information onto the blockchain, rather than all the different companies with all the different systems all the way along the supply chain not having a way to communicate that information, so we have to do it on paper at the moment. So this is a real message about all of this, is that this is all coming, and is actually with us now, and we're going to see a rapid digitization of food supply chain, and we're also going to see a rapid digitization of the internals of food companies as well to take advantage of that. If you'd like to follow a bit more about what we're doing in all this space, and we've got lots of exciting things happening, please join us at the Global Food Blockchain Initiative. You'll find us on LinkedIn, and feel free to contact me with any questions after that. But thank you very much.